Hi, Matthew. Good afternoon.
Morning, everybody, or afternoon. We will be starting just shortly when we get some more people joining.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, all. I see some returning names. That's very good. Thank you. We'll get started in just a few minutes. We'll see if we get a few more people joining. All right. I think we'll go and get started. Welcome back to those who participated yesterday, and to any newcomers, welcome. My name is Matthew McFall. I'm a senior private sector advisor for UNDP on the Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems team. I'll go ahead and let my colleagues introduce themselves again. Let's go with Christina.
Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, good afternoon, buenos dias a todos y a todas, to everyone. Lovely to meet you. I work with Matthew on the FACS team, UNDP's Food, Agriculture, Commodity Systems team, as a private sector advisor. It's great to be here with you today. I'll pass over to my colleague Greta to continue introductions from outside. Greta?
Thank you very much, Christina. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greta. I work together with Matthew and Christina, and I'm a Program Coordination Associate Officer. Just to complete from UNDP side, I would also like to thank you, our colleagues Alexandra and Philippe, who are supporting us for the delivery of this training. And I will now hand it over to Lara.
Thank you, Greta. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lara Jacob. I lead the FALUR Global Platform work for UNEP and the capacity building, development and delivery for financial institutions with the Climate Finance Unit at UNEP. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Raquel Costa.
Thanks, Lara. Thank you, everyone. Hello, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Raquel Costa. I work for the UN Environment Program, UNEP, the Climate Finance Unit, together with Laura Jacob, and I'm the project manager on behalf of UNEP of IFAC, the Innovative Finance for the Amazon Cerrado and Chaco, which I will present in a short.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Just a reminder that this workshop is organized through the Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems community, the FACS community, and we are recording, which we can share later, as well as notes. Also, that there is Spanish interpretation available, which you can access through Zoom. And for anybody who only speaks Spanish or prefers Spanish, if you could please let us know in the chat box. This is just helpful information for us to know when guiding discussion. All right, so today on the screen, you'll see today's objectives. Yesterday, we went through much of the kind of the why and the what in terms of engaging beyond your value chains, looking at engaging with governments through multi-stakeholder approaches, at jurisdictional and landscape type initiatives. And today we're going to get into more the practical elements of collaborating more effectively with governments, looking at the kind of step-by-step things you can do, aspects that different size companies can do, different types of companies, different scales and different levels of government as well. So we'll have a discussion, or sorry, a brief presentation. We'll recap yesterday, and then we'll go through a little bit on the guidance for how companies can engage, and we'll have a section on the financial institution engagement, which will be followed by another presentation on from Raquel on IFAC. And then we can wrap up with some discussion and talking about how this can be applied in a fuller program, which I will touch on briefly here. So a reminder, anybody who's new, this workshop is organized as part of the Food Systems Land Use and Restoration Program. This is a program across 27 country projects funded by the Global Environment Facility with the World Bank as the lead implementing agency. And so the workshops are organized for companies, country project teams, as well as any other stakeholders who are interested in learning more about potential partnerships and collaboration opportunities for improving agricultural production across these 27 countries. And as I mentioned, since the training is also being offered as part of the FACS community, the material is also beneficial to those outside of the fuller program who may have joined us. And you are all welcome to follow up to learn more, suggest any additional workshops or trainings, and to please join the FACS community if you have not already, to stay up to date with the latest events and any knowledge sharing you can do. With that, I think my colleague, I see a hand up, or is that an accident? Go ahead if you have a question.
So I have a question, and this is just with regards to the training. So in the brochure and notes that were shared, there are some trainings that are taking place in December and some in January. I just want to know if it's the same content for people that would like to sign up again, or is it going to be different content?
We were planning to have a training, I think next week, but we are going to postpone that one until next year. The training in the early next year will be similar to this, but it will be more targeted to the Asia Pacific time zone audience. So we may have the broad training will be the same, but we may have some guest speakers who focus on particular commodities or platforms that are relevant to those countries. All right. I think we can start with a Menti poll about anything we learned yesterday. So Greta's going to share that with everybody.
Thank you, Matthew. Let me share my screen. So I would like to kindly ask you to go on mentimeter.com. Let me just, great. So please, if you can go with your computer or with your phone to mentimeter.com, and you should enter this code. I will leave you a few seconds to do so. We will have this very short Mentimeter poll. So as soon as you are able to join, the first question is if you participated in yesterday's session. So I can see that most of you already participated. We have some new people who has also joined. That's not a problem. As my colleague Matthew said, we are going to recap what has been discussed yesterday. And you will also receive the slides and the recording so that you can catch up with what has been said. So I leave you some more seconds to respond. So thank you. We have 12 who has responded and participated yesterday, and 4 new people. So now the next question is if you can share one thing that you have learned or you want to learn today. So especially for the people who hasn't joined yesterday, please share your expectations for today's session. I leave you a few seconds to provide your answers. Just to recap, yesterday we explored why we need more public and private partnership around sustainable agriculture production. Today we are going to talk about how to do this in practice. So I see some answers. I want to learn about opportunities to engage, see practical examples of how companies and government collaborate, example of public-private collaboration, state of investment in sustainable supply chains, opportunities to engage. In particular, in relation to opportunity to engage, I would like to highlight the fact that this training is quite general, but we are here during the next, after the session or in the next weeks and especially next year to provide ad hoc and tailored support as needed, especially to the FOLUR country project teams on public-private opportunities to engage. Ideas for viable bankable pipelines of climate smart agriculture, how to strengthen private sector partnership from a CSR aspect and non-profit based in the agri sector, way of collaboration, how to finance those opportunities, to learn about mechanisms and opportunities to link private tropical agroforestry projects with public or private international initiatives, medidas de implementación sostenible para la producción agropuérica, aprender sobre la producción sostenible en el sector agrícola, how to measure agriculture indicators in the financial sector.
Did we lose Greta?
Yeah, I can hear. I cannot hear her.
She must have been dropped. Yeah. Okay.
Matthew,
Well,
can you?
Yeah, you're back.
Yes, yeah, sorry, my connection probably had some issues. I hope you could hear what I've said. So we finished the Mentimeter, so now I leave the floor to you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think you had covered most of it, so Good. Thanks everybody for sharing. We will take all of your comments into consideration, and hopefully we can address many of your questions. Second. Okay. All right. So what does engaging beyond value chains mean in practice for our work? So we'll go through today and talk about how companies can engage outside their value chains in several ways. So typically, when we're talking about engaging beyond value chains, that means working with multiple diverse stakeholders, including governments and civil society, to define shared goals and develop action plans. Engagement beyond the value chain involves collaboration with local or national governments and working beyond commodity producing regions. So they can take many forms, but typically involves taking part in coalitions, working groups, national, subnational platforms, commodity roundtables, or other multi-stakeholder initiatives. UNDP has been a part of many different national commodity platform initiatives over the years through the Green Commodities Program. And my colleague Christina can provide some examples of that when she's does the next few slides. So when we talk about public-private collaboration, we're talking about it in the context of multi-stakeholder collaboration and processes. So this really means, the list, I won't go through the list entirely here, but, interministerial government support. So you want, typically these issues cover multiple different government ministry portfolios of issues, whether it's Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of the Environment, Finance, Education, Health, etc. So it really needs to be cross-ministerial. Facilitation is a key element, a neutral facilitator to manage the process. Inclusivity, inclusion, participation of multiple important stakeholders, particularly those who are perhaps marginalized or otherwise don't have much of a voice, and including the one key element is having a key champion that can sort of really be the voice of the process. Trust, obviously, that is an important element. I think that's something we touched on yesterday. The sort of absence or insufficient amount of trust between the private sector and governments in many cases. So that's an important element of these multi-stakeholder forums. Shared ownership, so a strong sense of joint ownership by government, private sector, and civil society. I think it's in our experience, it's easy for stakeholders to see the process as owned by, let's say, UNDP or another agency who is kind of spearheading the organization. But in reality, what is really needed is that that government-led ownership in the development of national action plans. Speed, I think this is a key one that I know frustrates the private sector greatly, is the slowness of these types of processes, the slowness that government bureaucracy moves. And so I think it's important to strike a balance between a process that's slow enough to get that inclusion and genuine participation, but fast enough to not lose momentum and get the private sort of frustrate the private sector to the point that they don't want to engage anymore. So I think there's a balance that needs to be struck there. A resilient process that can withstand issues around political change, market challenges, things like a pandemic, being able to be adaptable and resilient to that. Resourcing obviously is key. These processes need to be funded and sufficiently resourced across multiple years. I think there's been some cases where I know these processes have been funded, The initial funding has been there to start development of a platform and a multi-stakeholder dialogue, but it's not necessarily sustained over time, which leads into that last one, long-term commitment. The kind of gets into the speed element as well. So having patience, persistence, and a long-term commitment for the process. So how to engage beyond your value chain depends on where you are now. Understanding your organization's ability to participate in multi-stakeholder processes at different levels. You can ask questions such as, how big is your company? Will it have influence engaging with governments in production regions? Does it have resources to engage in these kinds of processes? What part of the value chain do you operate in? What subsector? Who are your key stakeholders? Which sourcing regions are strategically important? Which are the most important production regions for the business and for the growth of the organization or portfolio of companies in the case of perhaps a financial institution? What local presence and capacity do you have? Is there already a local presence in the region? Are you equipped to participate in a multi-stakeholder process directly or indirectly? And another factor, how mature is your sustainability strategy? So is the organization still developing the basics for sustainability within its own operations and value chain? Or is it further along in thinking about these issues beyond the value chain, or just, more strategically within a company? I think this is a key aspect, because we have a lot of first movers, and many companies who have been at the forefront of this work for several years would have a more mature strategy, but national level companies in some places, medium-sized, smaller companies, perhaps have a less mature sustainability strategy. So I think it's important that all different levels engage. And even if you are, let's say, a company that has limited resources, a limited or a sort of a nascent sustainability strategy, you can still engage in different ways. So at a low engagement side of things, providing feedback on documents, contributing to industry associations, monitoring progress of the process, and providing small amounts of funding if possible. A medium level engagement could mean participating in meetings and coalitions, using advocacy and communication to provide public support, encouraging other companies, suppliers, and industry associations to participate, and providing moderate levels of funding. And then high engagement, that's the sort of level where company or organization is really convening other companies to participate. They are leading technical working groups or other aspects of the process. Basically they are a leader and providing technical assistance and a more significant amount of funding. So there are all kinds of ways and degrees to which companies can engage. So I think it's not really there's a limited amount of resources, or there's still much that can be done for all the companies involved. I'll pass on to my colleague, Christina.
Thank you, Matthew. So some really useful tools there and prompt questions that Matthew just went through. Yesterday, as you heard at the beginning, we covered the why do we need to collaborate? So today we're looking more at the how, and in your questions and your asks for today, you wanted to hear more about specific examples and more kind of concrete tools about how to encourage a collaboration of companies and other private sector actors in the collaboration efforts that you are all working on. What Matthew just shared, the last couple of slides, you will receive copies of the slides. So they are questions that you can use with the companies and other private sector actors you're working with in your country, your initiatives. With the For Law programs, many of them are requiring that landscape level coordination between the different actors. So if you are engaging or trying to engage companies and businesses and cooperatives, institutions into that collaborative space, they were a very, those last slides that Matthew went through are good examples of what you can ask them. We do have a couple of companies with us today, so would love to hear from you on your experiences of where you feel you have been collaborating with other actors and with government, which I'll talk about in a minute. So please share your thoughts in the chat, because we also want to hear from you all. If you have some good examples you'd like to share with the group, please put it in the chat in whatever language works best for you. So just to continue with then the how, Matthew and I work a lot with many different companies and private sector, and we do hear very often, it's like, I know I need to collaborate. I've got to scale up the work I'm doing, and it can only be done with collaborating with government in this area that I'm sourcing from. But how do I do it? That's the question we keep coming up. We know we need to do it. How do we do it? So let's have a look at some of the ideas that we have here. And again, for the companies in the room, please share reflections in the chat as well. So we have different levels of government. Many of you on the call work with government as well. Many UNDP, of course, it's our primary partner, but I know others who are here as well also work directly with government. So the first port of call, or first entry point, of course, is at a national level. And this is where, in many cases, we have the fundamental aspects of the enabling environment. This is where policy is set. This is where budgets are set. So this is where we need to at least know what's going on. This is where companies need to be familiar. And we're all often asked, that is a good input for companies. What is happening at national level? I don't know how to engage. So being able to, articulate that and share that is always good. So yeah, as you know, and many of you are working in this already, the policies and the budgets and the programs which are determined at a national level will be having a very direct impact in the sourcing landscape that we are operating in, that the FALOR programs are operating in, that many of the companies are sourcing from. So we need to be aware and familiar with that. For those of us working directly with government, it is important to also try and build some sort of and identify the leadership at a national level, and bring in private sector views for them to understand where some of the private sector is coming from. We will traditionally be going in at a sub-national level, or for companies at a cluster level or a sourcing level. But then if that's disjointed and not linked up to and articulated with national level policies, it may not be as successful. So national level, of course, is a key entry point. Next slide, please. And we find this diagram has proved to be really helpful. I think we've seen it before, but and we'll refer back to it throughout the course of today. But this has proved to be really useful in working with companies. So again, those in the room from the private sector, tell me what you think of it. But it's good to help visualize and understand all of the different levels where companies and other private sector actors can operate and can collaborate in beyond their value chain. As we know, traditionally, they'll be coming in at farm level, but as we can see in the diagram, we're talking about many different levels here as well. At a national level, as I've said, we know that's where the policies are created. It's the legal framework, for sustainable production. We know many of the underlying factors and challenges are around issues such as land tenure, land ownership, creating land cadastres, etc. That does not happen at a landscape or farm level. The decisions for the systems that need to be implemented are taken at a national level. So we need to be mindful of the need to engage there as well. as we said, obviously budgets are set here as well, but the national level is also the interface with other international funds, donor funding or climate funding and so on will be coming in or either directly to or definitely with the approval of national authorities. The other key part that we can't underestimate is the alignment around cross-cutting issues, which we can get at a national level. UNDP did a piece of work a few years ago. I know some of you on the call were involved in that, from Commitment to Action, where we really try to analyze what are the current commitments and what are the barriers for action to deliver on the commitments that we have as governments, we as companies, to reduce deforestation and improve sustainable production. What are the barriers? And very often, well, key barrier that came up was that we traditionally focus on, say, Ministry of Agriculture, possibly Ministry of Environment, and what are they doing? What are their policies? What are their programs? How do we influence those investments? But we know that they go beyond that. We should also be talking to Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Planning, and so on and so forth. And that happens really, or primarily happens at the national level. And so that cross-ministerial, more systemic view is really quite important. And we've discussed before, and I think you heard about it yesterday as well, but really having an understanding and visibility on those national commitments, such as the nationally determined contributions, NDCs. There are national plans on the SDGs, etc. What is happening there that is then determining programs, budget allocation, service provision at a subnational and a landscape level. So understanding and being able to work with governments at the national level is a foundational part and really important. But that's not the only area they can engage in, not the only level of engagement with government. Next slide, please. We also, and this is more familiar territory for companies, and maybe also for some of us, this is where traditionally companies involved in the production and sourcing of commodities will be focusing on a subnational and landscape level. It could be from a jurisdictional perspective, where are legal boundaries. It could be from more of a sourcing a landscape. This is a much normal, an easier entry point. And so helping companies think through, where are you operating? Where are your, as Matthew shared in the last slides, kind of where would be a natural entry point for them? And what is happening there that you can collaborate in? So how can we show, the companies that we want to work with and other private sector actors, where is a good entry point at a subnational and or jurisdictional level? Because it is closer to their sourcing areas, so more easier to make the business case in a way. Of course, this is where they source from. They know the areas here, but what is the government also doing here? In some countries, we know, talking to colleagues in Peru yesterday that were on the call, there is decentralization happening. So although policies are determined at a national level, there is a decentralization of the budgets and of some planning systems. The provincial and state governments, we know, can be responsible for the regional economic development planning and systems. How are they shaping that, and how are they investing into the landscapes that we're working in? So, what other mechanisms can also be set up, like climate finance mechanisms or other accountability and finance tools that could be set up with the companies and private sector coming in to offer their perspective too. So it's a great space for collaboration, and being able to show that to the private sector and companies will hopefully be a good incentive to bring them into those collaboration spaces. I'm just conscious of time, so maybe if we can move on to the next slide. Is that going?
I think the slides for Laura. Move on this one.
Oh.
Is this good, Christina?
Yep. Sorry. Yes. And so then we go carrying on just to look at the kinds of support that businesses and FIs can also provide. So you need to collaborate. We want to collaborate. How do we do it at all these different levels? But what else can businesses and other financial institutions provide outside of just their value chain? So hopefully we've managed to make the case for them to understand they should try and look more broadly, engage more broadly. So what else can I do? I will come and collaborate in those spaces at national, subnational, jurisdictional. Great. What else? What else can I do? Next slide, please. And again, we will, of course, share these slides. These are not the only things. These are just some prompts for you to consider, for you to use when trying to make the case and inspire companies and the private sector to come in to the work that you're doing and collaboration spaces that you're developing or strengthening with your work. I mean, one of the key things, of course, is to take part in strengthening the coordination and collaboration that we are working on, we are trying to do. There's going to be government there, we hope. There's going to be civil society representatives, as we heard before, kind of making sure it's very inclusive, and different companies as well. We need to all invest. Everybody that invests has to try and improve, communication and understanding each other, building those relationships, and that includes companies. So that is the first thing that a company can do that wants to take part in some of these activities. We also want to, we've identified, issues that require this kind of broader collaboration. One of the ones we mentioned in the last slide was around land use governance. As we said, one of the main challenges we know many of the landscapes we're working in is a challenge that's facing many of them. So that is something that can be worked in collaboration between public and private sector to look at how, is the governance and regulation going to be improved? Companies can bring in from their point of view in order to continue sourcing here, in order to continue investing here. This is what I need in my value chain for my market. Governments can come in and say, well, in order to do that, we also need X, Y, Z. Producer groups as well, we're bringing their voice here as well. So, we all participate in this, and we all can bring our perspective here. We can crowdsource in investment, but this is why we need collaboration here. How do we together map and prioritize hotspots that need to be looked at? How do we collaborate more together to share data on land use change? Companies have a lot of information on that, which they can bring into this. And in many cases, they've been able to invest in a lot of modern systems and technology that's able to bring great insights into that. Companies can also support the smallholders and the communities they're working in and with to empower them to know more about their land rights and how to access that. So they're just some examples of the kind of collaboration that we have there. I mean, equally, we know, a key target that maybe your work has to do is on improved conservation. How do we improve conservation policy and enforce it and strengthen the incentives and funding mechanisms? Companies can come into this space and bring their perspective on this. As I said before, in many cases, they have really great systems for their clusters. How can they share that to scale up the use of technologies that others are finding useful and interesting? How do they share the data they have from their sourcing areas into this collaboration forum to make that information available? They are already, in many cases, providing maybe technical assistance and funding. Are we leveraging that in order to scale up good practices, scale up resources, and leverage maybe additional funding? In better production practices, this is where traditionally a lot. So into within collaboration efforts, the knowledge of more solutions help improve production practices and farm. Already research usually just got in R&D into these space, the different actors, so government collaborating on they matching up together, are they learning together on what's worked, what happened. Also underestimate these very, you said earlier, are more flexible, are more nimble in a time frame, and so they may be pilots.
I think your audio is a little, it's cutting for some
Oh.
people. I don't know if there's an issue with the headphones or not, or. Yeah,
Can you hear now?
Can't hear you. It's really cutting a lot.
Christina, if I may, maybe try turning off your camera. I know it's not optimal, but perhaps that's going to help with the sound.
Is it better?
No, it's the same. I can jump in. Maybe you have to switch your audio method or something. I'll jump in real quick. In the interest of time, in fact, I think now's a good time to maybe address a couple of the questions in the chat. There was one from Jade at Danone, who's looking at, her question is, we speak a lot about landscape when speaking about forest commitments. What about regenerative agriculture not directly linked to forest protection or also water protection projects? Can they also be considered within the landscape definition or scope? I think that's a good point. The landscape or jurisdiction has obviously the definition of that boundary is flexible and depends on the circumstance and the particular country and situation. So, in my past life, when I worked on water stewardship more, the river basin or the watershed was the boundary of most importance when it comes to engaging in multi-stakeholder public-private collaboration around water stress, water pollution, and water stewardship issues. So I think that's one where that's based on the sort of geophysical realities of how people use water within a given location. It can also be grasslands or any other sort of ecosystem boundary. And then when it comes to jurisdictions, obviously that depends on provincial, state levels, community, township, et cetera. So I think all those are quite flexible definitions. And then Leonie, if I can find the question in the chat. When we mentioned, go ahead, Christina. Try again, yeah, say again.
The headphones, apologies for that, everyone. Thank you, Matthew, for rescuing the situation. I think
Okay.
question on companies, and actually we could look at this more broadly to say private sector. So your question is linked very much to the support that UNDP and some of our good growth partners are going to be providing within the FALOR program, is to help national teams with exactly that question. So who actually do you, in country programs, who do you need to be working with to achieve the objectives of the FALOR program or other programs? So, the private sector is a very broad range of organizations, from possibly producer groups and cooperatives, but includes the finance institutions that Lara and colleagues have been talking about, all the way through to the more traditional international traders and brands. But there's a huge array of national private sector actors as well who are involved in the supply chains and the production landscapes that we're working with. So what are we trying to do, and who needs to come into this collaboration space? Who do we need to be inspiring and incentivizing to think beyond their value chains and join here? So it inevitably will be some types of companies or finance institutions, not all of them, and thinking through who that could be and what is the ask of them is going to be part of the it's a process that teams need to go through. And all of then the identified companies, of course, will be at very different journeys in their, at very different points in their sustainability journey, as you say. So, you know, maybe many of the smaller national companies that we have involved are very early on in that journey, whilst maybe others that were exposed to international markets are further ahead. So how do we support them on that journey and help you know, with that? So it's a good question, and we really can't have one answer, one size fits all, because in every country and in every context, who you need to be engaging with and encouraging to collaborate beyond their value chains is going to be quite different. So again, some of the questions and prompts that we've shared now can be used to help teams distinguish that. Matthew, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you did a good summary. Maybe in the interest of time, did you want to go to the next slide? Let's see. Right, so this is getting into the sort of the how of the multi-stakeholder processes.
Yeah, and I think as you kind of illustrated before, and it's a good reminder, in these multi-stakeholder forums or platforms and so on, or whatever engagement mechanism you need to have in your program, in your country team, you know, we do need to remember that we need to have, you know, who's going to be responsible, where we're going to get the, you know, resources required, what is the level of engagement needed, and so on. And, you know, those principles that underpin multi-stakeholder engagement we discussed earlier, you know, we just need to make sure that they are front and foremost when we are implementing this, and that those expectations are clearly transmitted to the companies that we're encouraging to take time to come into these spaces. Thanks, Matthew. Back to you, and apologies for the breakups earlier.
No worries. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, you know, different maturity levels of sustainability strategies, different scales of government that we can engage in. So what does it mean for different parts of the value chain for a particular company? So all companies or financial institutions can participate in landscape, subnational, and national multi-stakeholder forums directly or through industry associations and corporate coalitions. You know, everybody can support supply chain initiatives that align with these forums and aligning corporate objectives, agree on common key performance indicators and reporting frameworks, and developing and publishing company action plans and progress reports. So those are actions that all companies can do. And on the slide here, we see examples of companies at different stages. So from the perspective of a producer, primary processor, and input provider, so somebody further upstream in the supply chain, you know, ensuring there's participation and views of farmers and smallholders are represented. That would be one key element. Sharing company data, for example, on farm mapping, conservation data, satellite monitoring, etc. And then, you know, collaborating with peer companies and pre-competitive processes across those landscapes is also key at this level. Traders can encourage producers to support and participate in multi-stakeholder forums, you know, include environmental and social safeguards in their contracts and commodity specifications. Committing to long-term supplier relationships is a key aspect. I think we're seeing that more and more as a risk management element too. And traceability is key at this from the stage where the traders are at, in terms of, especially in terms of the reporting back to the various commitments that they've made. Manufacturers and brands, you know, that's where it's really key to engaging the suppliers to support these multi-stakeholder processes, you know, prioritizing critical sourcing regions and raising awareness with customers on the importance of creating enabling conditions. So we're kind of just going from upstream to downstream in the supply chain here. And so the types of engagement methods will evolve in that sense. We're going to jump into so on the financial institution side, which is a segue into my colleague Lara next, is they can provide technical expertise, encourage participation from financial institutions, support financial innovation, etc. So Lara will get into that more soon. I'm gonna think, where are we at on time? I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to Lara's section, where she's going to talk about what does finance sector engagement mean when we're thinking about engaging beyond value chains. So Lara, over to you.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Christina, for that really great segue into discussing specifically what the finance sector could do when we talk about these types of multi-stakeholder engagements. And I think also, given the diversity of participants in this workshop, I think it would be great just to take a couple of minutes and reflect on a thread that Christina brought up earlier, and that is the program management units of the FALUR projects and country. So I think there's sort of two sides to this. One is sort of what the different stakeholders, if you can move to the next slide, please, Matthew. One is what the different stakeholders like the program management units and corporates could do to engage with the finance sector. And then there's sort of the question of what can the finance sector itself do to engage with these different groups of stakeholders and sort of specifically government. So I want to spend the next couple of slides reflecting on that kind of direct, indirect relationship with financial entities. So for the program management units themselves, I would say that sort of depends largely on what type of outcome you hope to achieve in your project. But ultimately, for the program management units engaging with FIs, it's largely about helping to kind of create a strong enabling environment that is conducive eventually to enhanced private sector financial flows. So for the country projects, engagement is often, I would say, it starts off taking a kind of risk-based approach to lending, but you can also engage with sustainable finance associations at the national level, and that also helps bring about a common understanding of environmental and social risk standards. And then there's also sort of the added benefit of supporting the development of innovative products to support deforestation-free commodity production that my colleague Raquel Costa will get into later. Next slides. Yeah, and Matthew touched on that in his last slide. In terms of specifics, what does that engagement with financial entities look like? And, is it feasible? Is it practical? Some of the experiences we've had in sort of trying to implement these activities, like, product innovations, oftentimes capacity is the biggest challenge. And so we say, one of the roles that the program management units can take is to sort of help financial institutions build their capacity through provision of technical assistance. So, whether it's training these financial entities on the different data that they could use to start assessing risk, or raising awareness regarding the various sort of risks and opportunities in the food and agriculture sector. So sort of there's a lot that can be done with respect to technical assistance. The second is sort of drilling down further, and that is data acquisition and assessment methodologies. And so for financial entities making the decision to invest in a company or invest in a sector, oftentimes that hinges on the quality of data available. And so this is another role that the program management units can take, is to help facilitate this enhancement of robust data sets, ecological data sets, but also starting to develop the right type of data that financial entities need to be making these decisions. And then lastly, and I don't want to dwell too much on that because that will be covered by my colleague, but I think my colleague Raquel, but that is sort of identifying the gaps and the opportunities to develop innovative financial solutions. So having that kind of ear to the ground, working with the smallholders, working with the sectors, and sort of understanding, what are actually the financing needs and who are the right partners, financial partners, that can help bring about some of these changes. Next slide, please. So that was sort of specific to the program management units. And I want to touch for the next couple of slides on the companies themselves and how they can engage financial institutions. And I would say a lot of what Matthew and Christina covered is applicable here. I think what is sort of unique about the company engagement with the finance sector is very much focused on the provision of data again. So when a company is onboarded through the financing process, oftentimes there's sort of a review of the environmental and social standards, and financial entities use that as an opportunity to also collect data, not only on the company, but on the sector. And so I think that kind of iterative process of fine-tuning the data acquisition, fine-tuning the environmental social governance criteria of the financial institution is sort of a critical role that companies could play through this sort of dialogue with their financier, because oftentimes it's not a one-way dialogue. It's sort of an ongoing discussion from onboarding through the annual review process, through periodic engagement, and so it's an opportunity to kind of look at what are the current and emerging environmental and social governance risks that the sector and the individual companies are having to contend with, so that the financial institutions are sort of well aware of them. The sort of second big bucket that I mentioned again is this role that financial institutions can play to help their clients de-risk their transition to sustainable production. So that's also part of that kind of technical assistance process, but it comes through the kind of provision of capital to enable that. And Raquel will sort of elaborate a bit more on that. Next slide, please. So that sort of brings me to the financial institutions themselves and the role that they can play to engage beyond their value chains and engage with, a multitude of different stakeholders. And Christina and Matthew sort of touched on engagement with governments. For example, as sort of, what is the correct entry point? We've got national level engagement. We have jurisdictional or subnational engagement. And that sort of all hinges on what exactly the finance sector wants to accomplish through this engagement. So asking yourself, what is my aim here? How does it sort of align with the aims I've set out for myself through my business strategy, through my priorities, and through understanding what my risk appetite is. So that sort of alludes back to the questions I posed during yesterday's session. Next slide, please. So I would say, first and foremost, the type of engagement that FIs can undertake is really, it's all essentially external collaboration, first and foremost. But, they can work with their peers to share technical knowledge in a kind of pre-competitive space. So that is essentially collaboration through these national finance roundtables or through, other industry associations. We also touched specifically on multi-stakeholder initiatives yesterday. But within the country levels, we often have national platforms of certification bodies like RSPO or RTRS or the Sustainable Beef Platform. And oftentimes financial entities are active participants in these initiatives. So this is another opportunity where the finance sector can lend a very powerful voice and engage beyond sort of their initial remit. The third is this bit about government engagement, and it's about really creating a favorable enabling environment to allow for sustainable land use finance to come about. And we heard from Christina earlier about the different levels of action with governments. Many of the same insights apply to financial institutions as they do corporates. So, for example, many of the activities with governments will be at the national or the jurisdictional level. At the national level, the engagement is essentially focused on changing the direction of production approaches. So it's looking at things like, how can we either bring about changes in fiscal incentives, reappropriating agricultural subsidies to more sustainable land use practices. So it's really about working with government hand in hand to sort of look at what needs to happen at the sort of the policy level to bring about the changes. At the jurisdictional level, I would say it's more of the kind of practical day-to-day work of the financial entity. So it's looking at what can you do to work with your clients or NGOs directly to help bring about change in that particular supply chain or that particular sort of production approach of your client. Yeah, two different levels of engagement, and it really depends on the level of change and what you want to sort of bring about as an entity. The third, and we sort of touched on that a bit yesterday, is sort of these global initiatives, these global commitments. There's a lot of government involvement, NGO involvement as well in that. And I think for financial institutions, it's really about trying to kind of raise the bar collectively as a sector and lend their voice. So I think there's definitely a role to play, but it's more around awareness raising when we talk about, global initiatives. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I think I can gloss over that a bit because, yeah, we've sort of touched on this already at length through the presentation that Christina gave. And I think, again, many of the same principles apply in terms of the types of questions you would ask and the level of engagement, particularly at the national level. I think we can, next slide, we can skip. Yeah, or maybe I will just say something sort of very briefly about that. Pardon me. And that is because I think it's a good segue into Raquel's presentation, and that is some of the direct actions that financial entities can take themselves to sort of spur this innovation is pardon me, is really about the role that they can play to unlock value, not only for the bank, but also for their clients and the jurisdiction that their clients are operating in. So that's really about increasing lending capacity to more sustainable lending practices, funding innovations, pardon me, and taking direct exposure with clients. So I've sort of mentioned a bit about that, working one-on-one with clients and governments to kind of help bring about the change that they want to see with corporates. But that sort of means working with a multitude of stakeholders to sort of help reduce some of the burden of the risk for the financial entity itself. So this is really about blended finance instruments. So I think the next slide I can, yeah, blended finance. And I think Raquel will touch on that through FACS. So I don't want to repeat things too much. Next slide. Yeah, next slide, please, Matthew.
I think we might have ended the section there.
No, there's one more. Yeah. So just to sort of summarize the actions that financial institutions can take, it's, as I mentioned previously, providing the technical expertise. And that's also receiving this sort of technical expertise from corporates, but also NGOs as well, to help assess, what types of investments they should be in, encouraging other financial institutions to, help raise the bar, raise the standards by working in these multi-stakeholder platforms, oftentimes at the national level. Identifying opportunities to start engaging in a more like solutions-oriented environment. So that's where I mentioned taking on some of the risk through product innovations, and I think the big thing is really trying to kind of align your lending with some of these national level government commitments as well, like nationally determined contributions or the SDGs. So there's sort of a lot that can happen. At the end of the day, it sort of depends on, as I mentioned, what you want to achieve as a financial entity, your internal capacity, and the types of sectors and clients you're working with, and your risk appetite. So there's sort of, I think, a lot to unpack there. But in terms of, the kind of main activities that financial entities can take, it sort of goes back to, what they normally do, and that's finance or investment. And so I think that's kind of their comfort zone, and many of what we say or what we recommend for financial institutions to do is sort of a natural extension of their main remit. So I think we're going into the IFAC presentation now, and I think it's sort of a good segue into Raquel's presentation, because that's sort of more of a deep dive into what FIs and corporates can do. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Laura. We are a little bit over time, so let me take this chance before Raquel jumps in to see if there's any questions, comments, reflections from the group. The floor is open for a few minutes to see, based on, we've thrown a lot of information at you, so feel free to jump in if you have any questions, comments.
Matthew, it's Leonie from JFA.
Hi, Leonie, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, 'cause in a lot of all these conversations, I don't hear a lot about the role of the landscape initiative implementers or the partners that help companies to engage in these production landscapes. Because from our experience, a lot of them actually engage through these NGOs or service providers, and I'm just wondering where, in your experience, like how I guess, how much can those companies, especially those without direct operations on the ground, engage directly in the multi-stakeholder forums, or is it really through their implementers, and what's their role there? Thanks.
Thanks. I'll let Christina go with that one.
I think again, it really depends in different contexts. We are finding that some of the sector initiatives are, really good spaces for companies that don't have, as you say, kind of like on the ground partners or teams themselves to be able to implement. I'm talking about international companies here, because obviously there's a lot of national companies that can. But from an international perspective and for commodities that are traded internationally specifically, forums such as the International Coffee Organization, World Cocoa Foundation, etc., provide really good entry points for engagement for this collaboration, because there you do have donors, other actors such as IDH, for example, who are working on landscape initiatives, or donors who are operating that, as well as in many cases, well, in the case of the ICO, as an example, International Coffee Organization, the producer governments themselves. So being part of those sorts of forums, which in the sort of multi-layered diagram that we have is on the global side, and I think some of that was covered yesterday. So, that gives a space. And then where we know there are initiatives such as TFA, which operate at a global level with national level roundtables in some of the focus countries there, then we would be assuming that international and hopefully national brands, traders, retailers, etc., can again participate there, where there may be hopefully engagement from governments as well. I would imagine, Lara, please chip in here, but in some of those global forums, I think it would be a great addition to have more FIs present, because we're not seeing many, and people are noting that is a gap. And I think here, the purpose of our training over the last 2 days is to enable teams who are working at a national level to have the tools to equip them to better engage with and bring in finance institutions and different companies. Lara, I don't know if you wanted to add anything there, but after that, also Leonie, obviously from, you are an organization working on landscape perspectives. If you have any suggestions that we could add to this, that'd be great. So we can include that as a tool or additional slides when we send the pack out. But Lara, anything to chip in?
No, I think you've covered it well, Christina. Yeah, and then in terms of these global initiatives, yes, I mean, indeed, oftentimes we hear the call that, we need more FI participation, but I would say oftentimes as well, the FIs sort of get together and release sort of their own statements or have their own sort of sub-working group, depending on how relevant it is for their own businesses. So I think that's something that's sort of worth remembering as well, is that, is it material for them based on what they're financing and how they're financing it. At the end of the day, it's great to sort of have a seat at the table, but you also sort of should reflect on your own leverage with companies and over the supply chain. So, participation for the sake of participation, sometimes it's also heavily criticized at times as sort of greenwashing. So it's a bit of a sort of a dance to kind of figure out, where you should put your efforts and, where your voice can sort of lend through credibility and through leverage the greatest impact.
Thanks, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and move to Raquel, and then we will have some more time after her presentation for additional discussion.
And maybe I'm just going to say, maybe Leonie, if you could share some thoughts in the chat. I'm not sure if we fully answered your question, and it sounds like you have maybe some idea. So please, do share in the chat. And if there's something additional we could include in this pack in future, then let us know. We can incorporate that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Raquel, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Matthew and Laura, also to introduce already the theme of innovative finance and the topic of blended finance, which I will explain a little bit more in examples here. And first, for those that join a little bit later, I'm Raquel Costa. I work for UNEP Climate Finance Unit together with Laura Jacob, and I'm the project manager of IFAC, which stands for Innovative Finance for the Amazon Cerrado and Chaco. And also, it is an initiative led by 3 organizations, which is UNEP, TFA, that we have a colleague here as well, and TNC, the Nature Conservancy. So next slide. So first, IFAC, at IFAC, halting habitat conversion from food production is a mission critical. And we say that because we cannot address this dual challenge of biodiversity loss and climate change without drastically reduce deforestation. And just a few numbers to remind us all about this critical mission that we have, because 80% of global deforestation is from agriculture. Deforestation contributes 12% of global emissions. Agriculture contributes 24% of global emissions, and 52% of agricultural land is significantly degraded. So that's why IFAC, next slide, please. Next, IFAC works with innovative finance because we understand that this is a piece where it's essential for shifting land use dynamics. And we see there is a bunch of other initiatives that works for the sustainable transition to agriculture and to sustainable agriculture. And we see that companies, financial institutions, traders, slaughterhouses, they need transparency and monitoring. So initiatives under that, they're necessary. Jurisdictional green growth initiatives, how to give them market access, and investors' ESG requirements. So we see that innovative finance, creating new types of products, is a piece, is essential piece for this puzzle for us to support this whole transition. Next slide, please. And the idea of IFAC came out of a study from TNC, where they found out that there is a 30 billion investment opportunity to support farmers in sustainable production of cattle and soy in the Amazon Cerrado and Chaco. And this was based on proven business models that shows that soy can expand without further habitat loss. We can expand soy in already cleared pasture land. We can also do sustainable intensification of cattle production. We can meet the future demand of beef and leather without expanding cattle in new areas. So we can also intensificate, and while we intensificate, we free up some spaces for crops production. And the third thing that it was recently incorporated in IFAC, it's about the agroforestry systems and non-timber forest products. So we also see those two models that they can provide alternative to livelihoods, to clearing forests, to cattle ranching. And I say that it's recently incorporated to IFAC because IFAC was launched in 2021 at COP26 in Glasgow. So these 3 organizations joined forces to mobilize the financiers of cattle and soy value chains to promote innovative solutions to finance the sustainable agriculture and the sustainable transition of those 2 value chains. And this year, so this first also I need to thank and also say that the Gordon Moore Foundation, Gordon Betty Moore Foundation is the one that it's granting this initiative. So it started in 2021, and we are now in the second phase of this initiative. And now that we are in the second phase, we expanded that to the agroforestry systems and non-timber forest products. And when we say we expanded that, we are now incentivizing the signatories and the whole ecosystem to finance those two business models. And our specific region, as I said, is the Amazon Cerrado and Chaco in the Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil countries. Next slide, please. Then we have some priority areas of work. So the first one is environmental management and impact indicators. So first we developed some guidelines, a document where we put all the indicators, impact indicators that we see that are necessary for the signatories to monitor, and how to monitor those impact indicators. First, we did that for cattle and soy, and now we just updated that for agroforestry systems, and it will be launched soon. It should be online anytime soon now. And we, just to highlight, we do provide a lot of technical assistance and reports for the signatories, but they are all public available, as we are all NGOs and multilateral organizations, and we have this grant from Gordon Betty Moore Foundation. So all the documents are public, and they are in our knowledge hub, which I will speak about it briefly. So we have this area of indicators, and we give support to the signatories on how to monitor them. And the second priority area is catalytic capital, because on those types of solutions, of financial solutions, as Lara was briefly explaining, so in blended finance, for instance, we are mixing and we're blending different types of resources. Could be from a company and a financial institution, a private owned or a public owned, could be from a foundation, could be from a DFI, from a development financial institution. And those types of catalytic capital providers, which are the more patient capital here, sometimes they are necessary for those kind of solutions, because when we are asking a farmer to not deforest, and here in Brazil, they are allowed to deforest at a certain percentage of their area, how you can incentivize them to not deforest and to not convert biodiversity, and to incentivize that, usually they ask for or a long-term loan or a better interest rate. And to get those types of solutions, we need catalytic capital, those actors in those structures. So they are the main actors for this kind of solutions. In our area of work, we dedicate our forces to connect the signatories that are developing new solutions with the main catalytic capital providers. We developed a mapping of the main catalytic capital actors, and this is public as well. So we do these connections for the signatories. And we also have an area of work of carbon opportunities. We first developed a report about how to finance zero deforestation and conversion-free leveraging. So what are the carbon pathways for that? How we leverage finance for that? And we are now about also to launch a new report about the role of transitional finance in meeting land use and climate goals, which goes a lot for financial institutions perspective, because most of them have those net zero goals, and also companies do have. And so this paper is discussing about how they can finance and which kind of instruments support them in financing for them to reach their goals that they put in their commitments, in net zero commitments. We also have an area of capacity building. So last year, we developed a training for financial institutions here in Brazil, where we discussed about the role of the financial institutions in developing innovative mechanisms. We are next year developing one specific for financial institutions and corporates for those kind of solutions that we are discussing in this training today, and also we'll give some examples. So we want also to foster these solutions here, not only in Brazil but in the region, because we're seeing, as Lara said, and the others already touched based on the de-risking role that companies have on those kinds of solutions, and also under capacity building or knowledge management, as I can say, we have the Knowledge Hub, where is also a landing page where you can go and find the IFAC resources, so the reports that we launched, the training that we did, the training is all on YouTube. So if you'd like to see the record of the lessons, you can go there. There is a link to see it. And there's other resources from other organizations related to this topic of deforestation-free and conversion-free and cattle, soy, and agroforestry and non-timber forest products, business models. And the fifth priority area is the producers advisory group. So we created, I think there is 15 producers now, which are those producers here in the region that they are already transitioning to sustainable agriculture, so they are more open to test hypotheses in different types of product conditions, and they can support the signatories on saying and sharing some ideas of, yeah, this kind of product I would take, or not, this loan or this condition, it's not sufficient for us to stop deforesting, for instance, so things like that. So we promote this kind of discussion between the producers and the signatories. And the last but not least, we also organize some events and participate in other events to communicate what the signatories are doing, and also to foster these type of solutions. Next slide. So nowadays, we have 16 signatories that varies from bank, catalytic capital funds, asset managers, securitization companies, value chain company, and facilities. We also have some partners such as BNDES and other DFIs and other NGOs supporting us. And next slide. The type of solutions that we encourage, it could vary in different types of solutions. So for instance, the first one, so farm loan products, we encourage the signatories to launch, could be long-term loans to pass recovery or to low-cost crop finance, could be a farmland investment fund as equity funds to buy and manage land under DCF models, could be capital market offerings such as securitized agricultural receivables, and in these cases the use of proceeds should be sustainable agriculture or should have like performance metrics for that. Corporate debt instruments such as sustainability linked loans and green bonds, and other innovative mechanisms such as producer services business that bundle technical assistance and finance support. And these specific, my colleague here that I saw and already gave some inputs, Carlos from IFC could also give some examples. They do a lot of technical assistance on their loans when IFC is doing a loan. And the other, next slide, please. So I will jump now in the examples that we have. So I brought here today 3 examples of financial solutions that were launched last year under the IFAC guidelines. And first, just I would like to invite you all to go take a look at the Knowledge Hub. And at the Knowledge Hub, if you go at IFAC resources, you're going to find the market report, the IFAC 2022 market report. Next year, at the beginning of next year, we're going to launch the 2023 market report. So we're going to find the solutions that were launched this year and how much it was. So for last year, it was $111 launched in 8 different financial solutions. And there were, I brought here today the solutions that are with financial institutions and companies to give some examples from what Lara was explaining. And this one is from N-Green. N-Green, it's a catalytic fund. It's IFAC signatory. And this product is together with FS Agri, which is a company here that it's a corn and ethanol producer. It's a large company, and they did this structure. It's a long-term corporate loan, and the innovation here goes that it's because usually, for those that are not familiar with the Brazilian financial credit market, usually credit here goes just for the harvest, like a year, or if it's an investment, goes up to like 3 years, like 5, it's the most. So a long term of 8 years, it's already an innovation in a solution, a financial solution here in Brazil. And they did a 8-year long-term corporate loan, and the borrowers were to support FS Agri, the company, and originating DCF corn for ethanol and animal feed production in the Mato Grosso state here in Brazil. And it was a $30 million loan. And the interesting also here, it's because we are saying about like a large scale, if we consider the whole operation of Agri, FS Agri, and also this loan promoted an engagement of the entire value chain of the FS Agri. So that was very a good and successful model to engage the whole value chain of a company and to incentivize those to promote DCF production, the clients of Agri, FS Agri. Next slide, please. The other solution is the Green Galaxy. The Green Galaxy, it's a nice product because it was developed by 3 IFAC signatories. So after all of them already joined the initiative, committed to mobilize and develop products, they got together and developed this product together. So the parties are JGP Asset Management, AgroGalax, which is an input distributor, and Verte Capital, which is a securitization company. And they get together and they develop CRA, which is receivable certificates of agribusiness receivables. And the idea is getting the clients of AgroGalaxy, the small and medium-sized farmers, to buy the inputs of AgroGalaxy financed by this CRA, but the input should be aligned with sustainable, low carbon and regenerative agriculture. So this was this specific use of proceeds. And what is also interesting here is that AgroGalaxy gives the guarantee for the producers, because we're talking about small and medium sized, and sometimes they do not have all the guarantees necessary for taking a loan in a bank or in a structure such as that. So to give some support and de-risk the operation, AgroGalaxy is giving the guarantee for their clients. It's a small product in terms of US dollars, so it's a $5 million US dollar product. They were testing this product, and now let's see if they launch a second tranche of this. But it was a very good way of testing and giving this opportunity for the value chain also of AgroGalaxy, an alternative of how to finance and buy those inputs for this specific use of proceeds. And the last example that I brought is from Reverte. Reverte is the name of the product, which the parties are Syngenta, Itaú, and TNC. They developed these long-term loans that Banco Itaú gives and lend the money to the Syngenta clients. So it's also a long-term loan. It's up to 10 years and it has 3-year grace period. Syngenta shares the portion of lending risk, and it's also the use of proceeds here is to expand soy production on degraded pastures and Cerrado using regenerative agricultural practice. This is a 32 million loan last year, and I know they expanded a lot this year, but I do not have the final number, but it's a very successful product, and where we can see a company also de-risking an operation to promote the transition to sustainable agriculture. So I did very quickly because I know we are out of time, but our last slide is just join us on this pathway for the sustainable transition of agriculture. And if you have any questions, I'm here to clarify. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Raquel. Lots of great information. I saw lots of interest in the chat for people to learn more about IFAC, to join. So anybody who's interested, please follow up with Raquel or Laura, and I think the resources were shared in the chat. We'll also be sharing the PowerPoint and other information about these workshops after their conclusion. So I know we're a bit over. I wanted to leave some time for questions, discussions. We have about maybe 10 minutes. If there's any questions for Raquel, if there's any additional thoughts on the material covered. I know we've kind of thrown a lot at everybody today, so now is your opportunity to speak up and let us know any thoughts, comments, reflections.
I think maybe a quick reply from Raquel, because we have had a couple of people asking about how can they be an IFAC member. So Raquel, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it is, we do a due diligence of the organization. So first email me, I can share my email and we can discuss. So the idea is the financiers of those value chains. So if you are in an institution, either a company, a bank, a fund manager, and get to know better about IFAC, we are going to schedule a meeting. All the partners, all the IFAC lead organizations will meet you, understand your goal. Like we want to understand what each organization is doing, what it's your aiming in terms of scale of product. So there is a financial commitment that you need to do. This organization needs to do that. It's confidential, but we just disclose the whole number of all of them together. So until now, I think we have mobilized $4.5 billion to be in commitments of financial products by 2030. And we have also an ambition of 1 billion disbursement by 2025. But our idea is to mobilize $10 billion by 2030. So after getting to know better about IFAC, if the organization is interested in joining, if it makes sense for the organization and also makes sense for us, so we do like due diligence also. We're gonna sign and then become partners, and the organization is gonna become an IFAC signatory and start to receive technical support, participate in bilateral meetings, the collective calls that we also do with the signatories and so on.
Great. So yes, if you could share contact details in the chat, I think that'd be really helpful. There's also a question that Eduardo put. I think Eduardo's not has had to leave, but I think it's a good question. Just in case you think there's anything you'd like to add, because I know you covered a lot of this in your presentation. But he says, do you have specific municipalities or landscapes in the 3 biomes? Because they're pretty big. So how do you address all the priority issues that you've discussed across such large areas? So you did touch on those, but if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
We don't have any specific municipalities or landscapes, so it's actually the whole, they're big biomes. But for now, for instance, a lot of agroforestry products are being in the Pará state, because this is a state in Brazil where there's a lot of things going on. But we're open to any municipality or any state in those regions.
Thank you, Raquel. And I mean, it's, you know, a treat for us to have somebody with the depth of experience, being able to speak directly from this, you know, piece of work that you're doing in the field. So if anybody would like to ask Raquel a question, or share a reflection on what she said, then please feel free to jump in or put up your hand or unmute yourselves. And if you'd like to do that in Spanish, our interpreters can translate for us as well. Maybe, Raquel, you were so comprehensive that it's all pretty clear. We are going to share your slides afterwards as well.
That's awesome. And I also share my email to everyone, so feel free to reach out to me. I'll be pleased to answer any questions and schedule a meeting.
Great, thank you for that. Matthew, back to you.
Thanks, Christina. All right. I think we have about 5 more minutes. I wanted to share one more thing. Not a presentation, so anybody who still wants to have comments, please do. But it's sort of it's our what we call the corporate action matrix. It's coming up here. So obviously we don't have time to get into the details of this today, but we're hoping perhaps next year under additional Fuller trainings that we can use this type of tool, and it can help companies, governments, other stakeholders to really plot out different ways they can approach engaging beyond their value chain in multi-stakeholder processes. So, you know, the way it's designed here, you can look at individual actions that a company can take, individual or collective actions that companies can take, and then collective actions. And it also goes into the different scales that you can engage. And so it's particularly useful for, if you're looking at a given sourcing region or a specific commodity or a particular issue like living income. This is a way to plot out different activities that you can do in the processes that we've been describing. So we're hoping that we can do some sort of deeper dive training next year, and we can do a more commodity specific or regional focus depending on the interest. So I just wanted to share this. There is this available. We will share the tool, the sort of matrix itself and materials, but obviously it's more of a practical hands-on tool rather than just something you can read about. So just wanted to share that before we wrap. And I'll give the opportunity to any of my colleagues for any final thoughts, reflections, and especially maybe Christina, you can speak to next steps under Fuller that companies or other stakeholders can do in the coming years.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. And just to also kind of highlight what you've just said on that matrix that you just saw, please do have a look when you get the materials. It was developed with companies. It's quite a long process with our Good Growth partners a couple of years ago. And many companies we have worked with have found it really useful because it's very tangible. They can engage their teams at a cluster level, at a district level, subnational, etc. It's a good exercise for them to go through to see, like, where are we now? Where are we collaborating? And how can we go beyond that narrow focus to collaborate beyond our value chains? So it's a useful tool. You can, translate it and work with your partners in your programs. Under the FOLOR program, UNDP and our Good Growth partners are also providing support to the country teams working on FOLOR on how to better identify and work with the private sector actors for achieving the objectives of the FOLOR program. So as I mentioned in some of the previous sessions we had, just to be able to think from the many actors that you have at a district level, at a subnational landscape level, producer groups, finance institutions, cooperatives, credit unions, you name it. There's a lot of private sector actors. So who needs to be in the work that who can directly impact, and who do we need to be talking to about what? So really helping teams use tools that have been developed on how to identify and prioritize the actors you need to be working with. Are they supporters of the work? Are they champions? So really kind of getting into the detail to help visualize and identify and develop engagement strategies. So really, really helping think that through, because very often we talk about engagement with the private sector. It's not all one big blob that's the same. There are a lot of different actors in there. So how do we start pulling that apart and really identifying who needs to be engaged how? So we will be providing packages of support on that with some very practical tools that you can use with your partners, with your in-country work that you're doing. So that should start at the beginning of next year across all of the FOLOR countries. And of course, as I said, drawing on the experience of our Good Growth partners as well as other FOLOR partners, some of whom are on the call today. So we look forward to meeting some of you again with that in the coming months.
Great, thank you, Christina. Since we didn't take a break, I'm happy to give everybody a bit 5 minutes back. We'll be sharing a survey afterwards, so please do take a look at that and fill out if possible. I don't know if Philippe has the link, but if not, we can send it afterwards. As mentioned, we will also be sharing all the material in addition after the workshop. And we will have one more workshop along, in this sort of Value Beyond Value Chains theme next year, so stay tuned for that, and please pass on to colleagues. With that, I think that's a wrap. Thanks everyone for participating and attending. We will see you soon.